Hi, it's Christy of So to Speak, and welcome back to the Closet series. You're tuning in to the second part of our special three-part mini-series on heart-centered leadership. Last week, we had a fantastic conversation with the President and Chief Operating Officer of Chobani, Peter McGinnis. So if you missed that conversation, you definitely want to check that out because Chobani alone is doing incredible work in the world. And they're also part of this three-part mini-series on heart-centered leadership because they're also collaborating with two of the other organizations who round out our entire series. So next up is Shelly Callahan. Shelly is the Executive Director of the Center, formerly the Refugee Center of Utica. And Shelly and I have such an incredible conversation. Shelly just embodies heart-centered leadership. She is hilarious and she's humble. And she's so passionate about what she does and the team that she works with within the center and the individuals that they serve. Just across the board, you can just feel it coming out of her words and out of her being that she just is just so appreciative and grateful and respectful of everybody who's involved in the center. And she, on top of all that, reminds me of two of my favorite singers ever. So she looks like Joni Mitchell, early Joni, and she and I had this incredible conversation that reminded me of one of my favorite lyrics by Mr. Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam song, Just Breathe. And the line is, underneath everything, just another human being. And that really is it. That is what the essence of our conversation really focuses on, where heart-centered leadership really is about how to humanize everybody and how to respect and empathize and remind ourselves that we're all interconnected, that we are all human beings, that we all have the same wants, no matter what race we are, what gender we are, what culture, what countries we come from. And the more that we can embrace that, the more we'll be able to work together to make the world a better place for all of us. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation. So have you always been an advocate for human rights? Like, you're so passionate about it. And I just would love to hear your story on what ignited that.
Not professionally, no. In fact, I didn't even know that the US had a refugee program before I found the Refugee Center in Utica. Have I always been an advocate for human rights? I think so. I was heavily influenced by my grandmother, who grew up in the Great Depression and was always, even though she had very little, was just one of the most generous, warm and welcoming people I've ever known. When I would spend the night with her, at the end of every night, she would sleep on her day bed and I would sleep in her bedroom not far from there, and I could hear her reciting her prayers every night. And it was for everybody, even people that she didn't agree with or that had maybe wronged her. And it was every night that I ever spent the night with her, I could hear her reciting prayers for people. And I think that resonated, and her generosity. And then my sister, my only sibling, has a mental disability. So she's cognitively impaired and she lives in a group home. And I think that opened my eyes to disability rights, to folks that are differently able, differently capable. My whole life kind of fighting for her to get, her share and to be heard and seen in a respectful way. And I've always just been kind of scrappy. So, and it's not that I'm necessarily looking for a fight, but if somebody says something that just doesn't feel right, I'm not terribly shy about voicing my opinion. How I found the Refugee Center, though, and the strange thing I think about me personally is that I am a mix of, outgoing. There's certainly an outgoing side to my personality, but I also need a lot of downtime and quiet time. So my career before this one was writing and editing and doing a lot of stuff that you do essentially on your own, a lot of reading, a lot of research, legal editing. And so I moved to the Utica area with my husband, who's from New Hartford, and I had 3 kids, and I left the workforce. And after having my third baby, I was really looking around for what I would do in this area that would be fulfilling, and I could, earn some money because we needed the income. And I walked into the refugee center, literally walked into that place, stood in the lobby, and just, I didn't know it existed or anything like it existed. And because I had been living in DC, which is a pretty diverse city, when I walked into that space in Utica, it just felt like what I wanted to feel again. Different languages, different cultures, different colors, different, it was just, I just loved it. And so I really did talk the then director, Peter Vogelar, into hiring me. Like, what do you have open right now? And I can do this, 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 and this. And just talked my way in, and then feverishly learned about the refugee resettlement program.
I love it. And it sounds like, too, that your background in writing and researching was a natural fit for you to learn more about the population and about what you can do to advocate for them. So, like, what a beautiful way to merge both of your passions together.
Yes. Yeah, it's been one of the things that was happening when I started there were some contracts that they weren't achieving 100% fulfillment on. So they were leaving money on the table. And a lot of it stemmed from not really understanding the contracts. So I dug into that right away and was able to help them achieve 100% of these contracts. And they needed the money. Obviously, all nonprofits need the money. So yeah, it was a good start. It was, it felt good. And I loved being there, and I've loved the people I've met from day one.
So 100% of how many contracts are we talking about? Because that's incredible.
Well, these were in the employment department. So there was 2 relatively big contracts there, and another big contract that they were not achieving 100% on in resettlement. It was tens of thousands of dollars that I helped make sure that, that agency achieved 100% of its, what was coming to them. And so that was pretty gratifying, certainly. But I also knew, because I didn't really know what I was doing in resettlement world, that I had to prove my worth.
And be able to, again, like, the proving your worth. Well, you overproved it by 100%, by the way, just saying. Yeah. And already having that background, the natural background of researching is beautiful too. And also, since the focus on this 3-part series is heart-centered leadership, your heart is in it. And there's such a big difference. I heard a quote once. I'm going to totally botch it. It's by Simon Sinek. If you know Simon Sinek, he's on the circuit in regards to, start with why is his big thing. He does the golden circle of, like, why is so important to understand and know. Mm-hmm. And I heard him say something along the lines of, stress is when you're working towards something that you don't really believe in or you don't really want. This is how I interpreted it. And inspiration is when you're putting in all the hard work, but your heart's in it.
Right.
So it's like there's hard work, and there's stress hard work, and then there's heart-centered hard work. So can you just speak to the difference of that in regards to the work that you do at the center?
Well, sure. It's one of those big questions, and you don't want to sound corny but
Shelly, corny is like the name of the game in the closet. So
okay,
turn it up.
So a couple of things back to my past experience in research and writing. I am one of those people who will herald a liberal arts education all day long, every day. Not because it's better than any of the others, but it's certainly as good as. And if you can read and write and think critically and communicate well, there are lots of things you can do in the world and move the needle for the better. So I just always, I'm always so thankful for my liberal arts education. About inspiration, I am inspired in this job, certainly in a way that I wasn't, with editorial deadlines. Even if what I was working on in that arena, at one point I worked at the US Supreme Court. So I'd be working with law clerks and the Office of the Reporter of Decisions on cases that were important. But, my part was making sure citations were accurate and the briefs were put together properly, the reports and everything. So it was different. There were deadlines and there was stress, and I was engaged and involved, but this is different. This is every day I get to meet people who are coming from incredibly difficult circumstances. Many of my colleagues are former refugees. I get to see and touch and be with and share food with the people that we're providing services to. It's very much community building. And so you get inspired. You also, you really feel like you have skin in this game. You want the people that you're working with to be successful. You want your clients to be successful. You want your colleagues to be successful. And through this work, I'm connected to refugee centers across the country. I'll read about an inspiring program in Colorado or in Utah or, anywhere. And it's just, you want everybody to be winning. And yeah, it feels different than any other job I've ever had. And in some ways that's wonderful. In some ways it can be exhausting because things don't always go great. There's stressors that come in, things that are out of our control. The refugee resettlement program is going through some really tough years, and that's been hard to weather for the center, and I think for every person that works in resettlement. So there's a plus and a minus to being as engaged as folks that do this sort of thing are.
Well, and I think that you're bringing up such a good point, because where is the boundary in regards to caring so much for the outcome for the refugees that you are literally working with, the individuals, but then just as a whole, do you have any best practices at all that you could offer?
You know what, I do. Surround yourself with colleagues that you love and can share experiences with, because there is definitely something to be said for being able to commune with the people that are in the same trenches as you are.
Sure.
Because they're going to understand,
yes.
What struggle you've been through, why you're so heartbroken today. They're going to really understand how big and amazing your wins are, and they're going to be able to, to lift you back up when you've taken some shots and maybe had some losses. So, collegial sort of community is incredibly important in these things. And also just being aware of where your needle is in terms of, empty, full tank,
yes.
you're kind of at the end of your rope, or, maybe not, and doing things to address that. You can't ignore that, especially when you work in human services, because it will trickle down.
Mm-hmm. It will. So yes, absolutely. And there's so much self-awareness and proactivity and beyond self-care, right? So self-care is super important. I don't want to dismiss that, but I feel like we're desensitized to that because we hear it so often.
Right.
Like, how can we re-engage ourselves because it benefits everyone else too? So it's not like a selfish act to say, right. I need to actually do something for myself because I can sense that I'm burning out. I'm like I look at it like just kind of like a spark that's frayed, that's just kind of losing all of its light. And so it sounds like you are talking about being aware of that so that you can refuel before you get burned out.
Oh yeah. I mean, there have been days where I just had to, send an early morning email, I'm out for the day, and I had to go hike or go hang out with the dogs.
Beautiful.
Because I wasn't going to be useful in a good way for that day. And I hope I built an atmosphere where staff can also relay that information, because it's important. And I think it's one of the most important things for folks in leadership roles, or that have folks that are working in an agency, is to make sure that you give people the space whenever you can to take care of themselves, or at least to let maybe they need a break. Maybe it's for an hour, maybe it's the afternoon. But if you don't have those channels of communication going, especially when you're doing human service, and there is, burnout it's real. And when you hear the traumatic stories of, 3 different clients in one day that are all refugees, and you're the case manager, And then, you know, in our case, a lot of times you live in that community. Those are people from your ethnic community that came, you know, they share your experience. So when you go home at night, you don't, there's no place to really get away from it.
Yes.
So I
You
try
got
to
that.
be really, really aware
Yeah.
of, you know, who's had a heavy week.
Yeah, it's a lot of juggle, especially in your position, because you're making sure that you are not running on empty, and then at the same time, when you maybe need to refuel, there might be other people who are needing to refuel. So it's this constant dance of figuring that out. And you and I had the pleasure of meeting over dinner, and I remember you talking about that, like that some of the employees actually live in the communities with the individuals you serve, and it's like, where does the line get drawn? Because
Right.
they're not going to say no if someone's in need. That's just within
Right.
their nature. So I love you being able to share that so articulately and so beautifully, and you're embodying. So what we hear so often is like, whether it's your kids or the people who are on your team, as a leader, you have to embody what you're preaching. You have to actually practice it. So
Right.
it's so easy to go, oh, take time if you need a mental health day, or you need, but if you're sitting there burning out and all over the place, they're going to be like, wait, Shelly's not doing that. So it's a cognitive dissonance, right? So I love hearing that when you can, when you really can, because sometimes you can't, even though you're aware, even though that's still very important to still be aware that you can't do it, if that's clear, right? At least you're still aware, like, okay, I need to get back to this. But that you're taking a hike and you're getting out in nature and you're being with your dogs, and baking, which you and I both love doing.
Yes, I love to bake.
Which is like the COVID, it's the COVID go-to, right?
It is. My waistline is definitely not. And I mean, this, yeah, I
Well, I
love
gotta
to
say,
bake.
you talked about a lemon raspberry treat that you made for your daughter, and I was
Yeah.
just like, that combo, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, so just that you have those outlets, I think it's super important that you're embodying that you're not just preaching it, but your team is seeing you practice it as well. That like, if you are to be there for the people that you serve in full on passion mode and full advocacy, then you have to be able to refuel, or it's a disservice to them in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And you need, I also have people that I'm close enough with, both at work and at home, to let me know when, you know, I'm getting a little testy and maybe I haven't recognized it. You know, someone who, like, you were a little sharp in that meeting. What's going on? So it's always good to have those folks around you too, that kind of let you know when you're not maybe performing at your best.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally true. And you know, you had said before that when you get sleepy or you're tired, that you can get a little scrappy and irreverent. And I'm all game for seeing that, Shelly, by the way.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
more sleep. I hope you do get more sleep. But I do feel it is super important to have those people by your side, because that passion that can really be influential can often be dismissed and lose credibility if you come at it from like a reactive standpoint, that we all have a tendency to do to some degree. I mean, you know, but having those people it's so huge. And yeah, that's great. And you know, I'm wondering too, like, so we're talking about embodying what we're hoping that our teams also do in regards to refueling. And since there's a big focus on heart-centered leadership here, I'm wondering if you could just share your definition of what it means to be a heart-centered leader.
For me, it's an interesting question. And I watched a little bit of Peter's stuff and I loved what he said. For me, I think it just means seeing the big picture, because you have to consider many different things at the same time if you're going to do heart-centered leadership, and all the connections that you and your organization have with each other and your community partners. Yeah, it means really taking a good look at what what the why is. Why are you doing this? What are you really trying to achieve? Are you being inclusive? You know, part of the DNA of my agency is, you know, being welcoming and inclusive. So for us, that colors everything. But there's a quote by Desmond Tutu that I love that says, my humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together. And I love that. Makes me, like I feel that. So for me, it's connection. And it's not always just the obvious connection. It's looking for partnerships and connections that might not be the first things you think about. My grandmother was a huge figure in my life, as you'll probably hear. But, I used to ask her when she would make dinner for us, can I have a couple of my friends, have dinner with us? And she would always say, there's always room for one more. And I'd be, when I was little, I'm like, but I'm bringing 2 friends. And she would just, wink at me and like, think about that, Shelly. There's always room for, and so that's how I try to work in the community. That's how, when I put together projects, I don't just think about the refugee center or the refugee community. I think about our entire community. I think about, other immigrant community. How's any program I want to do going to impact everyone in this city, everyone in this county? And this year, we've really started to work with state partners. So we're, really starting to think bigger about connectivity, which is what I think heart-centered leadership is. I also think that as I thought about this, I can't help but think that there's a feminine angle to that as more women become leaders. And really, we're just at the front end of seeing women in leadership in great numbers that have started to have, the years of experience in leadership where I think, and I do think a lot of women lead a little differently, and the world is changing, I think, for the better. I think there needs to be a male-female balance. So in some ways, I think, this leadership from the heart thing is kind of what women do just because of who we are and how we manage our families and our friends and all the stuff that we do.
And I love you focusing on the consistent area of connectivity when it comes to heart-centered leadership. It's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. And Peter and I touched upon that too when he was talking about like how he embodies and how the team at Chobani embodies heart-centered leadership, how it's in their veins and that's just who they are. And then how they're paying, just to highlight that again, they're subsidizing for childcare. It's just unbelievable. It's so incredible. And we just talked about how it's all connected, because when you have people who are, say, for example, at the center, feeling a sense of belonging, feeling valued, feeling that they're offering value, they then go to get gas and they're kinder to the gas station attendant, and the gas station attendant then's kinder to his wife or to their kids or whoever, and then it goes on and on and on. It's right. We're not on an island. We're not living alone. One of my good friends always says, we're not on an island. It's like, we're not. We are all interconnected. So I love hearing that there's a big meta approach from your vantage point. So I'm hearing perspective, interconnectedness, empathy, humanity, which is not surprising at all that the center and Chobani are collaborating, because the core values of both companies, organizations are so in line that it's like such a beautiful fit. But I just want to stress that again about that natural interconnectedness. And I do agree that there is something about that feminine energy that men have too. It's an energy. Feminine energy is receiving, masculine energy is the action. So to be able to pair those together is so beautiful, and to be able to tap into that is so beautiful, because women are doers. We have a lot of masculine energy, especially when we're alpha, and especially when we're heading things like. So to be able to tap in and to receive, I think is huge as well. So if you could discuss, when you were talking about Desmond Tutu's quote, I loved it. And it reminded me slightly of, there's this great quote that Brene Brown said, that is, you can't hate anyone close up. And I'm just like, yes. Yeah. So when I would love you to talk to people who were not able to be completely life altered like I was by a walk in their words, the event that the center paired with other refugee centers in New York State. Can you speak to that? Because it was one of the most absolutely hopeful, beautiful, interconnected, humbling experiences ever. I cannot speak highly enough about it. So I would
Thank
love for
you.
you to, I absolutely loved it. So I just want you to just share with people what it was about and how it came to be.
So it actually was born the year before. We tried it out, and the way it came to be was interesting. We were looking for ways to build awareness about refugees as we celebrate World Refugee Day, and a lot of people just really don't know much about refugees in the world or in this country. So that was the first thing. And we've had lots of events over the years. And actually, Yvette Ramirez, our receptionist, she wanted to be on the planning committee for whatever new event we were going to plan. And she was really, really passionate about doing a walk or a run because, there's lots of them in and around this area to raise dollars and awareness. And she participates in them. She's a runner. And so and she actually showed up to this, maiden meeting with a lot of the work done, like and so that's always impressive when someone shows up with an idea and they've done, a little work. That's great. And so I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, there's so many walks and runs, like people like them, but there's so many. How do I make this about who we are and what we're trying to do? And for some, everybody walks and runs with earbuds in. So I was like, what if we record the stories of, refugees, whatever they're willing to share. It can be about their journey or their experiences here or, whatever, and put them in a SoundCloud. And that's what people listen to as they walk. And so that's kind of how the idea was born. The first year we were really making it up as we go, as we often do. And we kind of pulled it together. My executive assistant was working with SoundCloud. We were really just learning as we went. And we got about 30 people to do it the first year. And they loved it. And so that was kind of our trial run. So this year, we were planning to scale it up for sure, because we liked the way it had happened. And we had found other people that wanted to share their stories. So we were very excited about it. And in the meantime, COVID hit and there was a shutdown, and World Refugee Day is June 20th every year. And most of the folks, including us, like to have large in-person celebrations and community support and vendors. And so we knew that wasn't going to happen. So one of the silver linings of COVID and even the last 4 years of this administration, which has been, whether you're for or against them, really tough on refugee resettlement. There's just there's no gray area there. They've been trying to shut the program down. Mm-hmm. So is that I have been talking to my colleagues across the state. And a lot of times when you write grant proposals or applications, you're competing with these people. So we knew each other for sure. A lot of times we had been competing for the same grants. So this whole scenario has allowed us to get to know each other in ways where we really spend time advocating for things together. It's really kind of allowed us to change our relationship to each other, to get to know each other better, and be more connected. Yes. And so I invited all the agencies that resettle refugees across New York to join a Walk in Their Words if they wanted to. And we developed the website. We collected stories, the ones that the agencies that did join, and I think there was 7 of us altogether, sent in some stories from folks that they had. There was a lot of excitement in Buffalo. All 4 agencies there joined us, in Albany, in Rochester. It was really, really, it was just so exciting and frankly fun to work closely with folks in other agencies across New York State. And the event itself, I'm always, you don't know what you're going to get stories-wise. You just kind of put the call out and you hope for good stuff. And I was blown away listening to these stories. And, from my perspective, you kind of feel like you've heard it all. You're going to get to a point where there's not much that, maybe moves you in a particular way. But I just found the stories so moving and inspiring. And I love the idea that these are people that are in our community.
Yes.
I mean, these
They're
are
so different. All the stories were so different. Like not one story was the same. And
right,
they all are part of it. It just leveled the playing field to humanity.
right.
And it also, it was so humbling, very subjective, but so humbling to hear the stories and what they went through in the genuine resiliency. Like we hear that word all the time. Again,
Right.
I get I get a little bit of a chip on my shoulder when there's like a hot trendy word, because I'm kind of like, okay, we're going to use this all, but that's like legit resiliency.
Yes.
And just the gratitude that oozed out of their voices for the opportunity that they're given and their families are given by being accepted into their communities. It's like, and there was one specific one that my girlfriend and I walked to talk about after we both walked separately to listen. And I have to say, I did try to I was like, oh, I'm going to use this as net time. I'm going to listen and I'm going to clean my house. And it was not the same effect as when I walked. It really wasn't. It was a totally different experience. When I
That's
was like,
interesting.
it was totally different. I felt fully absorbed in the conversation. I felt like part of a conversation when I was walking. Whereas when I was cleaning, I was kind of listening, but it was just different to me. So highly recommend the walking, doing like full on doing that. But there was one story, there were so many beautiful stories, but there was one that really, it was right, we were in the middle of COVID. We couldn't hug. That's like when we for
Right.
sure could not hug.
Right.
And I surround myself with huggers. I'm a hugger. It was awful. It was horrible. It was literally, I'm getting emotional. It was horrible. And there was one story about a man who had such a cultural difference because he came here, and I just remember him talking about how he felt completely disconnected because he reached out to hug somebody who was a stranger, because that's his culture.
Right.
And he was so rejected that he felt even lonelier than he already had felt being in a new country and having to acclimate and having to integrate. And I just burst out in tears listening to that story. It just was like, it was so heartbreaking and oddly heartwarming. And he was so vulnerable in sharing that story. And I just cannot thank you guys enough for putting that together and putting it on and doing it so beautifully. Like it was just through and through such a tight experience. There were no loose ends. And so, yeah, just thank you so much.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because we worked so hard on that. And because COVID hit, we built that website. One of my staff people, Emily Hansen, is amazing. She put that together. Dan, it was, and this is one thing I will say about diversity in general. If my agency was just me and people who look like me, that event would not have come together. I am so thankful to my staff who are a few decades younger than me that can just manage technology and so that came together. I was thrilled. And it's funny, you talk about, you couldn't hug. We were gonna make bags that we were gonna mail to people for signing up and whatever. And it was so incredibly scary at that point. We didn't want to actually have people touching the mail. Like COVID, that was such a fearful time. And so that's why we literally did everything virtually. Your goodie bag was virtually.
Yes.
And I was just thrilled with sort of how we managed that. This year, I really want to take that and invite some national partners to join us, because the truth is that there's more refugees around the world than there ever has been before in our history, by tens of millions. And with climate change, there's already increased migration of all sorts of people moving to to escape whatever. And so I think raising awareness and just asking people, and I think in a sort of experiential way, to open your heart to be welcoming, because these people really have, they didn't choose it. And it's not a good time being a refugee. When you talk about, you know, that man's loneliness, it's very lonely, I think, initially and stressful for refugees. They lose everything. And a lot of them, you know, move to the other side of the planet when they come here. Everything is different. And so I just, you know, I love to raise awareness about that. And, you know, to the folks who still, you know, have a us, them sort of mentality, you know, this creation of the other, you know, look at the fires in California, look at the hurricanes in Louisiana. Climate change, natural disasters, whatever can happen anywhere. That can happen to any one of us. So, you know, open your heart, open your eyes. It's, you know, this is our reality. As a species, we have to learn how to take care of each other.
And it's so dehumanizing. I mean, they're scared. They're hitting all of the major, extremely catabolic, heavy emotions.
Yeah.
That isolation, and it can be so dehumanizing from a place of fear, of looking at them as it's all fear. So
Right.
people who are looking at them as the other, it's all fear.
It's all fear.
It's all fear, and you're losing sight of that they are a mother or a father or a brother or a sister or a son or a daughter or a grandmother. Like, we're forgetting that humanization of it,
Right.
that connects all, that transcends language. It's like,
right.
I remember when I first moved back to the area, I worked with Upward Bound, if you're familiar with that organization. And I worked with ESL to do acting classes. And I had, majority were Burmese from Karen, Vietnamese for sure too. And it was like a 6-week class. For the first few weeks, there was like no talking. I was the only one talking. We would do a lot of nonverbal acting classes or like acting exercises. And then there was a point where I said to them, do it in your native language. Like, let's do, because some of them spoke more fluent than others. And they came to life. Like, some of them came to life being able to speak in their native. And then by the 5th week, there was one girl who spoke for the first time fluent English. And we got into this conversation. We were kind of breaking each other's chops. It was a total power move by her.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, until I trust you, why am I going to show you that I can speak English?
Right.
So I was like, I get it. I appreciate it. It also shows me how you now trust me. So I'm so happy about that, you know, like it was, but it broke down the barriers, and my whole point of bringing that up is that it transcends, like, we're all human beings, and it just transcends that idea of the other. We are all mothers and fathers and sons and daughters, and have all the same emotions. And I do believe that a walk in their words really did bring that home. So are people able to still listen to it, or was it a specific event where this?
Yeah, no, sorry, my dogs are barking.
Real life, we love it, Shelly, bring it on.
No, I believe it's still up on our SoundCloud. So if you go to our website, you can find a link to it. The other thing about refugees that, you know, when they come, I think a lot of folks immediately hit on the gratitude. They should be so grateful. And this is such a great opportunity for them without ever processing the trauma. For them, it's a great loss. Yes, they're grateful, but they're processing a whole lot of things.
Yes.
Really, for the first couple of years they're here, and probably trying to learn a new language, find employment, take care of their kids. They're oftentimes this family that's been left behind. So there's real grief.
Sure.
There's real things to work through. Take a step back, and the reality is we should be grateful. We should be grateful that we are in the position that we are in, and we should be happy to lend a hand. I mean, you know, just flip it on its head. Be grateful for all the things that you have, that you care about in your life, your house, your kids, your dog, maybe a glass of wine. They lost all that. They lost everything that they cared about, except for, you know, the family that's come with them. So I just think that people need to give them space.
Yes.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and it's so complex, and it's not so polarized in our emotions of like grateful or not grateful. There's like a whole space in between.
Right.
So just like we have, right? Like during COVID, it really highlights like we're not just grateful or just feeling like you can jump from guilty to grateful in like 2 seconds flat. And then there's a myriad of emotions in between. And it's not just for if you are born and bred in the United States. It's a human, that's our birthright as humans. We are human, we're complex, we have a myriad of emotions. And
Right.
I love you highlighting that. I think it's incredibly important for people to remember that, especially because Utica is known as the town that loves refugees, which I love that about our area. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I love how the center, I keep calling it the Refugee Center because it was formerly
Yes.
the Refugee Center of Utica, for those people
Yeah.
who are unaware of that. We touched upon how you yourself define heart-centered leadership, and just you shared very generously how you choose to embody as much as possible and how you find where your needle is in regards to needing to refuel. And I'm wondering also if you could just share how the team itself, you had talked about how it trickles down. So how is the team at the center embodying heart-centered leadership? Can you share some specific examples?
So, sure. Well, so one of the things with regard to leadership at the center is I really empower the people that work there to sort of be leaders. So and to give them to the space to sort of try creative things. Maybe things don't work, maybe they do, maybe they're completely different than I would ever do something, and yet it works. So I always love those experiences where somebody brings something, you know, that seems a little off, and then you find out they were right and you're really glad that you hired them, and you know that they work with you. But so what we've been doing, we have senior staff meetings every Monday. So that's about 14 of us. And we talk about what's going on, and these are Zoom meetings. And so we really do connect, talk about what's going on. These used to be in-person meetings. And I will say that from my perspective, this being closed, not being with the staff every day is really, for me, a hardship. I miss people. A lot of things would happen, you know, you just walk down the hall to stop in to ask somebody a question about a certain program or contract, and then, you know, you would talk for 5 minutes, and you know, maybe a new idea would pop up, or you just hear what their kids were doing. I mean, that seems harder at a distance. It seems harder in a Zoom meeting, and I really miss that. So I have been trying to do more one-on-one calls with people. You know, it's a little time consuming, but I think totally worth it. But in this next week, we're having an all staff. We used to have monthly all staff meetings in person. We would provide lunch, and it would be a meeting, and a lot of times maybe an activity or a game, and we could all get together on a Friday afternoon and just kind of relax and share food. So that's not happening, obviously, in COVID. But next Friday, we are going to get together. I am going to have pumpkins delivered to the center. Everyone can pick up their own pumpkin. We're going to have a pumpkin carving contest. I have some other things bought, and we're just going to be on Zoom and hopefully share some good times and talk. I also do go to the office, usually at least once a week. I'm starting to increase that. And some of our staff are there every day. So the folks that are doing immigration and citizenship work have to meet with clients. So they are doing so appointment only. Other programs, as needed, have presence in the building. I think for me, we have to be careful, and we always have to make sure that we're modeling best practice with COVID. And I think it's a little tricky because a lot of times the information changes. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask, stay 3 feet, stay 6 feet, stay 12 feet, only be outdoors. You know, it's just, but I want to model best practices for our communities. So I've been really careful about how we open the building and how we go out into the community. But for me, this has been hard. We do human service. We used to have 4 adult full day ESL classrooms on site every day. There were hundreds of people in that building every day. This feels, it feels a little less than in some ways for me. My caseworkers, so we just got 23 newly arrived refugees in September, which was fantastic because we had gotten hardly any all summer. And for the first 14 days, there was mandatory quarantine for those folks. So we were really case managing in a way that we've never done before, making sure people had a computer or a phone and doing things remotely. Not scheduling all the appointments that we normally would schedule the day after they get there until, 2 weeks out. So it has definitely been challenging, and I am still figuring it out. And I am definitely opening to anybody's great ideas because I think the winter's going to be rough. I think, the shorter days, less daylight's already kind of bumming me out a little. And I miss my colleagues. And I don't think we're going to be able to open anytime soon.
I think you're speaking very well relatable sentiment when you say that, specifically for our area. And I do honestly believe that hearing this story is part of the solution for what we have ahead with our winter, is just feeling less alone, feeling more connected. You're just so honest and humble and heart-centered, literally heart-centered, right? And so, and genuine in regards to where you're at. Like it's hard, and it's especially in the work that you're doing. It's a roller coaster of emotions, and to say otherwise is just kind of stifling them underneath. Like, oh, we're really trying to stay upbeat. Like, no, sometimes it's a really crummy, crappy time. And so doing what you can do, being open. That was one thing I heard you say that I loved, is as a leader to be open to what other people have to bring to the table, to go back to what your grandma was saying, like, bring more people to the table. Like, if anybody's going to take anything, that's going to be one of them. What's grandma's name?
My grandma Dot.
And of course. I mean, why would she be named anything other, right?
Her true name is Doris Marvel. But she's no longer here, but she's with me every day for sure.
She is here right now. And Doris Marvel sounds like a fictional character in like a, who's the guy who wrote Cider House Rules? It sounds like it would be in his book.
Oh, John Irving.
Yeah.
Yeah, she really could have been a fictional character. When I describe her to people, yeah, she was just such a great woman. Didn't finish high school, had to go to work in the Depression to support her family. Her father was blinded in an industrial accident long before there was any social services or welfare. If you lost your job back then and couldn't feed your family, they just starved.
Sure.
So she only made it to 8th grade, which bothered her whole life. But she was an excellent seamstress, just an incredible baker, funny, generous. And I will say, in her nightly prayers, I figured in there heavily, because I had a few years where I was, a little bit of a wild child.
Shocking, Shelly. But aren't the best advocates reformed wild children? I think so. I think you've just found a productive way to redirect your rebelliousness.
Yeah, I think, yeah. My mother and I were heavily in the prayer section. It was pretty funny to hear her prayers. You would hear exactly what she thought your faults were. I
love it. Yeah, Grandma Dot. Gotta love Grandma Dot. Like, at the end of the day, make more room at the table. Figuratively, literally, we are all going to be back at literal at some point. I know it doesn't seem like that, but just for people to do what they can. And, and also just to highlight Grandma Dot even more, didn't go past 8th grade. And like, what education is not connected to heart and humanity, right? So like, how much heart and humanity she had.
Right. Or intelligence, because she was just so smart. And to, you know, I learned to sew from her. I learned to knit and crochet, but she used to sew our clothes and make her own patterns. And, you know, if ever I bought a store-bought pattern, you know, oh God, I don't know if you remember gauchos, but gauchos were the ugliest, craziest thing that I just insisted that my grandmother make me at one point. And she thought they were the stupidest, ugliest thing. But she would just, you know, this pattern doesn't make sense. And she would just throw a piece away and create something, you know, better. I mean, she was just incredible. And I was always freaked out, you know, kind of going off the path. Ooh, you know, you've thrown out the instructions. And she would just do it better. And so she taught me a lot of, I think, really great, useful life lessons.
I think that's beautiful. And it goes right back to what we were talking about, you embracing other people at the center, bringing ideas to the table, being adaptable to being off the path of what you thought the path should be. Like, it's so necessary as a leader. We hear transparency, we hear empathy, adaptability, inclusivity, you know, like your ego is so on the back burner. You can feel it, you know, and it comes up, you're human for sure. But when it comes to receiving ideas from other people on the team, you're a leader, you're of service to people. They're not servicing you. So, and you're
right. That is certainly, that's my intention, to support the folks that that are at that center, both the clients, but certainly the staff. And I've said this before, and I honestly believe it. You know, I think we have 23 full-time folks at the center right now, and a whole bunch of on-call interpreters. But you could take our little center and the staff I have there now and plop us down anywhere on the planet. And I think we would find a way to be successful. Like, these are some of the most intelligent, kind of savvy, creative people I've ever worked with. And I used to work at the Supreme Court. I mean, it is just, you know, many of them are former refugees. Many of them speak several languages. I don't, you know, my brain isn't wired like that. I'm just in awe of the people that I get to spend my days with.
But that's the point, right? Like, just to bring it home, the point as a leader is to pay attention to where your strengths are and where you are a part of the sum. And so you bring in other people where their other strengths are, because you're able to say, my brain I'm not wired that way. So let's hire someone else who is wired that way.
Right.
And then you have like a powerhouse. Like, it's amazing. So kudos to you with being aware of that and humble enough to admit it. And awesome. Love Grandma Dot. Damn, I love Grandma Dot.
Me too.
Okay. Love her. She's just awesome. I will be having a glass of wine in honor of Grandma Dot tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Was that her beverage? What was her beverage? Old fashioned?
Oh my gosh. No, it was crazy. Slow gin fizz.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she would give me little bits of it on New Year's Eve, when you know, because we'd get dumped there by our parents because our parents went out. And she'd make, you know, and they were pink, you know, slow gin.
Oh, that's so pretty. So gin, obviously. What else is grenadine?
I think, you know, I think slow gin might be a thing.
Oh,
maybe.
It's like an actual bottle of something.
I think so. It's weird. I've never ever, you know, I'm going to look into this actually, and maybe have a slow gin fizz in honor of Grandma Dot.
This is your maternal?
Yeah.
See, my maternal grandmother loved scotch, and I don't drink scotch. So I'm going to have to go with my paternal grandmother and drink an old fashioned tonight.
There you go.
That's what I'll put in the notes for the show. I'll put the recipe for a slow gin fizz and an old fashioned.
Oh my God, I love that.
In honor of Mimi and Grandma Dot.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll celebrate. Why not? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I want to bring it home with just, this is, you're the second parter, you're the sandwich, you're in between of the 3-parter on heart-centered leadership. So we spoke to Peter McGinnis, who you know well, who is the president and chief operating officer at Chobani. And we're going to be speaking with Rachel Daughtry, who is the director of agency relations at the Compassion Coalition. All 3 of you guys, it's just such a powerhouse trio. I love it. So can you just share with people how the collaboration with Chobani started, and then also add in with the Compassion Coalition?
Sure. So we've known Chobani for a long time, well over a decade, really from when they started down in New Berlin through our employment department. So they were open to coming to us for workforce years and years and years ago. So we had a really good, strong relationship that way. I've met Hamdi a couple of times, done some things with him. he is, I think, an incredible human being. I think that, you know, he started that company certainly to be successful and make good yogurt, but he always saw the bigger picture and always was thinking about, you know, how to be useful in a much bigger and more meaningful way. And so over the years, we stayed close with Chobani. And I think about 18 months ago, they actually provided us with a grant for our Welcome Center. So, you know, we have a newly created Welcome Center, and they contributed about half the salary of the person who runs that Welcome. Yeah, it was a transformative amount of money, because I couldn't have done it without them. And just over the years, they have been responsive to really any concern or need we've voiced. And I think the thing that is most telling to me is they are a preferred employer, which means that we have folks coming in from all different communities that we serve and asking, is there an opening in Chobani? That would be my first choice, because they treat their people in a way that the communities appreciate. And so that to me is the most telling thing, that they're treating people well. And I did listen to Peter speak before, and your comments about him. And I think what really makes Chobani sort of ahead of the curve a lot is not just that they do the good stuff that they do, it's that it's in their DNA, and they really believe that it's the smartest thing. It's smart business, because it is. A lot of other companies, you know, not to disparage anybody, but they have a program out there that's meant to do something, and sometimes it's just because of a look, or they want their brand to shine in a different way. With Chobani, it's absolutely who they are, and you can feel it and see it. And Peter spoke beautifully about why they did it, and just the fact that they understand that this is good, smart business, because it is.
And it's, you said it's in their DNA. I think Peter said the same thing. And it is smart business. It's also not created because it's smart business. Smart business is like almost second.
Exactly.
Right?
And even the childcare thing is brilliant. I work with so many employers that are struggling to get workforce right now. And part of the barriers might be transportation. A lot of it's daycare, affordable childcare. So it is smart to provide that for your workforce.
And genuine. There's no agenda. It's not like you're doing it just to kind of get out and get a name for themselves. It's because they're really understanding, going back to the center, that humanization of, I'm a mom, I'm a dad, I get it to a degree. I want to be able to help you. They also are aware that by having lower stressed employees, they're going to have better employees. Like it's such a no-brainer.
It is a no-brainer, and they have low turnover. I have lots of employers that literally come to me and say they've been struggling. They might have 80% turnover, and some of their and how do you maintain consistency or run a business with that? And so, Chobani, it's so smart, but they're doing it for all the right reasons. And the folks that work there, and I also saw the part where Peter talked about making sure people were safe in that factory, because they're there for, some of them 12 hours a day. As someone who sends folks there to get jobs, that was just, I was so moved to hear that, because that's the way I feel about people in my building. You want to take care of people. You want to take care of your people. And I really admire the way that they do business.
And going back to what you had said before about how when refugees come to this, let's say specifically to the center, they are so stressed out, they're so exhausted, they're so overwhelmed. It's like all of the emotions that are draining to the human spirit.
Right.
And to know that there is a place close to home, that's community, our community, where you feel genuinely, respectfully, safely, with integrity. I can send you, you've come to me out of trust, and now I can send you to another, like you're kind of handing off to another trusting pair of hands.
Yeah.
Which is it's huge, because when refugees are coming and creating that sense of trust with you, to just willy-nilly send them out, even though they need to make money, is really unnerving.
It is really unnerving. And, you know, Chobani has come back time and again for translation work. If they need things translated, they call up any time that there's, you know, any sort of bumps in the road. We don't understand what's going on here. Could you help us with this? They really do support their employees, you know, and it's almost like a way, you know, in the 1950s where people would work at the same company their whole lives and felt sort of, you know, a part of a bigger thing and cared for in a way that's kind of just not the way business is today. It's so much more coldly transactional, you know. So it's just really nice to have Chobani in our community. I mean, we're just so lucky that, you know, he decided to do this here.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
It's so true. And you talking about that cold transaction, like everybody can visualize that. And so there's so much compassion that comes along with it too. So it's a natural fit that the Compassion Coalition would be the third part of this series. And so can you just speak to how you're working with Rachel and the Compassion Coalition and the center are working together as well?
So yeah, the Compassion Coalition is, I'm kind of in awe of what they are able to do. If you go to their warehouse or their grocery store, it's just incredible what they've been able to bring to the community, you know, at low cost. They have donated so many things to us, everything from office supplies, like reams and reams of copier paper, pens, pencils, and all sorts of things to give to our clients, backpacks, I mean, just toothbrushes, just all the stuff that we, you know, are able to pass along to our clients. And they have supported us. Like, we were doing World Refugee Day, I think it was a couple of years ago, and realized we had forgotten about ice and the coolers to keep it in. And we frantically called Rachel, who was like, of course, come. They had huge coolers filled for us with ice in it. And after that, they were like, keep the coolers and count on us for ice every year. Awesome. And Rachel just, she has such a big heart. And she's always so excited about whatever they're doing that she's infectious. It's great. So I really, I admire what they've done. They're incredibly institutional. And the other thing that's great about them is they have come to us and, you know, as they put together this grocery store that is, you know, reduced prices for folks. They've asked us, so what do refugee communities like to eat? What are some things that we aren't, you know, that we don't have on our shelves right now that would really be appealing to the folks that you're resettling? And always, who's coming and what would they like? So they have just been, well, one, they're definitely heart-centered leadership. They're so smart. They're just so smart. And if you look at what they've created there, yeah, they're wonderful people doing great things in Utica. And it's not just for the Refugee Center. If, you know, you could ask anybody in Utica, any probably nonprofit organizations for sure. They're so supportive of the rest of us.
I've heard that consistently of Rachel. I've not had the pleasure of meeting her in person. We talked on the phone prior to having our conversation, and her energy was through the roof. Like I have a lot of energy, and we were head to head. Like it was a gorgeous conversation because we both met each other here and just off to the races. And you could feel her heart through the phone. Like she just I'm so looking forward to it. I've heard only fantastic things about her, specifically her, like the Compassion Coalition too, but definitely her. And I just want to highlight, you know, small acts of kindness. People may feel like it's inconsequential or it's just no big deal about sharing ice and saying, I'm going to give ice every day for the World Refugee event, or for the Ride for Missing Children event, or whatever event it is. And it's like, it's these small acts of kindness that add up to the masses of kindness. So just not to look past like these small moments of feeling helpless and hopeless. Like, you don't have to save the world in one fell swoop. It's all of our jobs to do these small acts of kindness. And if donating ice is your thing, run with it. Like, run with it.
Yeah. And they were so happy to do it and really happy to be included. I mean, that's the thing. It's that they give and they do it with such joy and generosity, and their spirit and heart is in the right place. They're just, thank goodness they're part of our community, because they make it so much kinder.
So Shelly, do you have any events coming up for the public to be involved? Oh, I saw one of your doggies. I didn't know what was happening. What a love.
One of three.
Okay, I love the doggies. It makes it real. Any events that are coming up that you want to share with the public?
Yeah, so we're going to have a holiday donor drive. Not exactly sure what that's going to look like right now. I know one of the things we often do is we ask for coats and winter gear for some of our clients, but we're also going to be trying to raise some money. And as that progresses, you'll be able to see more about that at our website, thecenterutica.org. All sorts of information up there. So yeah, go to our website.
Awesome. And also Facebook, Instagram. I mean, that's where I learned about Walking Their Words, was through Instagram too. So make sure to follow the center on Facebook and Instagram too.
Right.
As well, for sure. Right. We often hear how COVID has done so much to us, right? We can all gather together and just have some sort of like anti-COVID conversation for sure. But COVID's also done many things for us. And so I was wondering if you could share, what's one thing that COVID has done for you?
You know, it's brought my kids back home. So my kids are adults, so they're all home with me. The third one will be coming home next week from grad school and be continuing to do it remotely. So, you know, this is something that would not have happened without COVID, that we would all be back in our house all together and having sort of the amount of time to spend with each other that we have. And for me, it's been an incredible blessing. I love hanging out with my kids. They might have a different view of how this is all played out, but you know, it's given me more time to, you know, cook dinners with my daughters and my son. We all are watching the British baking show. I don't know if you do that,
it's our favorite.
Yeah, so you know, yeah, and I've been able to go hiking with my kids. So it's really given, in that respect, time with my kids that I wasn't anticipating that I would get back after they had, you know, started going to college. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Wrapped it. Thank you so much, Shelly.
Sure.
This was so fantastic. I just love the work you guys are doing. I love being able to highlight work that I believe in, that is literally changing the world in the right direction. So thank you to everybody at the center for all of the hard work you guys are doing.
Well, thank you for inviting me to do this. And I actually, it wasn't bad. Like I kind of dread, I'm not a public speaker. I have to do it, but I think it's the thing I really struggle with. And it wasn't bad. I don't feel drained. Usually when I...
You came on the call feeling tired, and now you feel energized. I'll take it up.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So good job to you.
Beautiful. And Grandma Dot.
And Grandma Dot. And yeah, have that cocktail tonight. I'll do the same. And maybe at some point when it's safe, we can get together and chat, do other things.
And we can cheers our cocktails in person.
Yes, that would be lovely.